What's up, YouTube? Welcome back. In the previous video, I discussed JavaScript variables. In this video, I'm going to talk about types. There are only a few different types in JavaScript, so we're going to go through them relatively quickly. So open up your browser and press F12 to open up your developer tools. Make sure you click on console. All right, before we go any further, let's actually define what a type is. A type is effectively a set of characteristics about a piece of data that helps you determine its behavior. In addition to you also understanding its behavior, the runtime also understands behavior. Let's define one of these types. In the previous video, I mentioned that we have numbers. For instance, 5. Well, we know as humans that we can do things with 5. For instance, we can do certain operations like addition. We can do subtraction. These are the characteristics or the behaviors, I should say, that inform us what type of data this is. Because this is a number, we know that it's countable. We know that we can compare numbers. We can determine if one number is bigger or if one number is smaller. These are all characteristics that are intrinsic in the fact that this is a number, right? So a type is just a way for us in the runtime to understand, what we can do with a particular piece of data. I hope that hand wavy explanation makes sense. Over time, this will get better, I promise. In any case, first type that we introduced in the previous video is a number, and it's just 5, 10, things like 1.2, 7.8, etc. All right, second type that I introduced in the previous video is a string. Now, you may remember that you can start a string with a double quote like this. By the way, this is called syntax, right? So in order for us to express this particular data, there is some syntax involved. In this case, it's double quote. This tells the JavaScript interpreter that, hey, this is a string. So we'll put in William. You have a string. We can also use a single quote, this one right here. Single quote is just a double quote, but without you having to use the shift key. We'll put my last name. Actually, we'll just put iPhone 14. How about that? Cool. We have two strings. We have two ways of defining strings. We have double quote and single quote. You may be wondering, why are there two ways of doing this? Well, in some instances, we want to be able to use apostrophes. And using double quotes allows us to do that without having to escape the string. Let me show you what I mean here. So I can say William's iPhone. Notice that it's okay with this. I can do this just fine. However, if I try to use a single quote to do the same thing, Williams, we'll say MacBook Pro. Notice here that we get an error, a syntax error. It's saying unexpected token identifier. Well, the reason why it's saying this is because the string ends here, but then I have this other bit right here, which JavaScript is trying to interpret as an identifier, aka a variable, potentially a function, but we haven't gotten there yet. So for right now, it thinks that it's a variable. There is a way that we can get around this, and it's called escaping. We can escape this here quote. Hopefully you can see that. Let me zoom in just a little bit more. We can escape this little quote right here by using another piece of syntax, which is a / maybe? I don't know. Whatever this character is. I don't know what that is. It's either a forward or a backslash. Let's see how that works. Williams. All right. I'm going to use my escape character, and then I'm going to use another quote. And now I can say MacBook Pro. So notice here that I had to escape this quote so that the JavaScript interpreter doesn't interpret it as a quote that's going to end this string right here. And you'll notice that this expression is evaluated to Williams MacBook Pro without the slash. The reason behind that is because the JavaScript interpreter realizes that this is an escape character, so it's not going to actually get output. Hopefully that makes sense. The third type that I introduced in the previous video is a Boolean. Let's get into that. Let me clear this out. Booleans, as you may remember, they're one of two values, true or false. They're pretty simple. So this is a Boolean. Oh wait, no, that's not a Boolean. That's a Boolean, true. And this is a Boolean, false. Those are the only two. So we're going over three types so far: number, string, Boolean. Those are the most simple ones. I'm going to call those the primitive types. There are a few more, but let's call these the primitive, like the fundamental types. There's another type in JavaScript. It's very weird, and it is called null. Yes, this is a type. It's used to represent the absence of a value or nothing. You may be wondering, like, well, why do we need to be able to represent nothing? Well, it turns out it's incredibly useful. It's just like zero in math, where it's like, it's just incredibly useful to have. So as you may remember in the previous video, we were doing variables. So let's create a read-only variable, const. And then we're going to set this equal to null. So now I have a is equal to null. In this case, I can never change it, so maybe I will not use a const. Let's use b, or we're going to say let. We're going to use let b equal null. Now, when I see b, this tells me that a developer, a human, someone has explicitly said that b is nothing right now. This is incredibly useful because sometimes we may be going through a collection of values and we want to keep going until we get to nothing, aka there's no more values. Null allows us to do that. I'm going to go into a lot more detail about null in the absence of values a little bit later, but for now, just understand that null is one of the types in JavaScript. In JavaScript, there's another way that we can represent nothing, and there's a subtle difference between null and this next value, and this value is called undefined. For what it's worth, the value and the type are the same. So the type undefined is undefined. However, the value undefined is also it's weird. All right, just go with me here. Undefined. You see here that it says undefined. So this is a value. It's an expression that results in undefined. What is undefined? Well, it's kind of similar to null, except that if I were to do, let's do let C, well, C has no value. It is truly undefined. How is this different from null? Well, null has to be explicitly set by a human, a developer. Whereas undefined is literally that. It means that a value was never, the value was never set. It was never given. If you don't assign to a variable, its default value is undefined. The only way that it can be null is if you assign null to it. That's the difference. So one is explicit. The other one is implicit. This is incredibly useful. But it's also incredibly confusing. If you don't understand it now, that is okay. This is more of an introduction to types, and as we go through the series, we'll start to get a little bit more familiar with what we can do with undefined, like its behaviors, as well as the characteristics that it has. Next, we have an object, and I'm thinking about how to explain this. You could think of an object as a collection of variables, just using words that you know so far. You could think of it as a collection of variables. The way that we create objects is to use curly braces. So on your keyboard, your curly brace is going to be, let's see, if you look for your return key, If you go up one key above that, you're going to have the forward slash, or one of the slashes. You're going to have a slash and a pipe. This character, you're going to have this. If you go immediately to the left, you're going to have the curly brace. You're going to have the right curly brace. But if you just do, if you just hit it, you're going to get a square brace. What you got to do is press shift and then that character, and you're going to get a curly brace. So the way that you define a object is by using curly braces like this. This right here is an empty object. We'll see here, it's empty. Let's actually assign that to something. So we'll say C is equal to this right here. And now we see C is an object. Now, I said that this is kind of like being able to have a collection of variables within one space. Another way of saying that is a list of key value pairs. The key being a name, the value being some value that is one of the types that we've just introduced, including an object. What do I mean by that? Well, let's say that C is equal to this. We're going to say name. I'm going to use a colon. This is another piece of syntax here that's required for objects. And I'm going to set my name to a string. Remember, a string is quotes. I can use double quotes or single quotes. I'm going to opt into using double quotes. We'll say William. In fact, I'm not going to just say name. I'm going to say first name to kind of drive home the point. So we'll say first name. And notice here that I'm using camel case here still. Right? We want to make sure we're using camel case for any name that we use, including key names. Another piece of syntax we're about to get into is a comma. If you want to have a list or more than one key value pair in an object, we separate them with commas. So we're going to do last name. And I'm going to say Shepherd. Then I'm going to do age. I'm going to say 33. Then I'm going to say is tired. How about that? Is tired. I'm going to say true. Let's see. I'm trying to make sure I'm using all of the types. So we have first name, last name, age, is tired. So we have string, number, Boolean, and I'm going to stop here and we'll go more into detail later. So we'll just say that. So now we have an object. And that object is a collection of key value pairs. The keys are first name, last name, age, is tired. The values are William, Shepherd, 33, true. The colons represent the binding, the key value pair bit, right? So William goes to first name, Shepherd goes to last name, 33 goes to age, true goes to is tired. Now, why do we have this object? What is it useful for? Well, it turns out that in a lot of cases, data doesn't really stand alone. Sometimes it makes sense to group pieces of data. In this case, like this is a record for me. Now, if I want to, add another record, so instead of saying C, I can do D. I can now have this same type of object structure, but instead of putting William, I can put someone else's name. Instead of age being 33, I can use another age. Now, this is incredibly useful because we get to pluck or pick particular properties, and this is a key word here, properties from within this object. And a property is just a key, right? So I can do C, and here's another piece of syntax. We can do dot. All right. Now you'll notice here that we have those properties or those keys that I defined in this object. We have age, we have first name, we have is tired, we have last name. Let's use last name. See? So this object allows us to group together values, and if we wanted to access a value, we can call the object, in this case C, and then we can index into the property that we want. In this case, it's last name. There's an alternate way of doing this, and sometimes you have to do this, and I'm going to explain to you how or when we would do it this way. So let's create a new object. So instead of saying, actually, let's just say C is equal to, and I'm just going to copy all of this. And this time, I want to have a property with a space in it. So if I want to have a property with a space in it, I'm going to have to use quotes like this. And I'm going to say, this is the prop. And then I'm going to say, I'm going to use the other type that I haven't used yet, which is null. Remember, null is an explicit value. Developers will set things to null when it means it's the absence of a value. The JavaScript interpreter will set things to undefined when there's an absence of a value or when nothing's been assigned to anything. I like to only use null because like it helps me understand who is responsible for what. I'm always responsible for nulls. Other humans are always responsible for nulls. JavaScript is responsible for undefined. Okay, now I have my new object. Now, if I were to do C dot this is the prop, I get a syntax error. The reason behind that is because I have this space here. So the JavaScript interpreter is interpreting this as C dot this, which doesn't exist. And then we do this space, and then we do is. So now it's thinking that this is either a variable or a function. We can't do this. So how do we access properties with spaces? Well, that's the other way of accessing properties, which is instead of using dot, we use a square brace. The square brace is the same key as your curly brace. Just don't press the shift key. So now I can put in strings, right? Like it has to be in as a string, as a quote, because that's what it is here. I can now type, this is the prop. And notice that I get back null, which is what I set it to, right? So now you see that we have two ways of indexing into an object. We have what we call dot syntax, and I'm going to spell that out, dot syntax. And we also have the square bracket syntax. Okay, there's one more type that we're going to get into. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about it because for all intents and purposes, you will never use it, at least not directly. That type is called symbol, okay? The way that we create symbols is by a function call. So we'll say test. This is a symbol. I'm not going to go into detail about this right now. This is more of an advanced feature, so maybe this will be something that I get into a lot longer, a lot further down the line. But it's important to know that they exist, so here you are, symbol. All right, these are all the types, so let's play around with this a little bit. I'm going to introduce a new operator. It's called the typeof operator, typeof, T-Y-P-O-F, typeof. What's cool about typeof is that if you give it a value, it will tell you the type of that value. Here's what I mean. Typeof 5, number. Okay. Typeof 5.6, number. Typeof true, Boolean. Notice what's happening. It's giving me back the type as a string of whatever the value that I pass it. So let's pass in another thing. Let's say undefined, which remember, undefined is both a value and a type. I know it's confusing, but I don't know. It's JavaScript. So that it is what it is. So we see the type of undefined is undefined. Let's see type of, let's do an empty object. Oh, it's an object. All right, let's do type of C. Remember that object that I created in the previously? Remember, it was a variable. I still have access to that variable here. We see that that's also an object. And let's remind ourselves what C is. Remember, it's this. That's an object. Let's say I do type of symbol, and then we'll do test. We see that it's a symbol. But notice what happened. Notice, this is interesting. If I did type of symbol like this, it's a function. But if I then put in this right here, it's a symbol. Why is that? Well, this evaluates to a symbol, the function. Like the function, when you call it, it returns a symbol. So therefore, type of calling that function is going to be simple. However, if we don't call that function, we see that it's a function. We'll go into what functions are later. I'm not sure when I'm going to do that, but it's not going to be in the next video, but it will be very soon. Now, there is one little thing. Oh, wait, no, I need to also do string. I'm sorry. Type of William, we see a string. Also, I can just do type of this right here. We see it's a string. If I do single quotes, it's a string. All right. So now let's get into the weirdness. The weirdness is null. You think that because null is a type, that the value null would be the type null, but in actuality, that's not the case. So we see that the type of null is an object, even though null is a type. It's weird, but it is what it is. Okay, these are all of the types. In the next video, I will cover operators. See you in the next video.